Hey Panthers, Miss Byrne here. So we are going to be doing some more work with variables and patterns. Our learning target today is I can evaluate or solve expressions and equations using substitution. Today you're going to need a pencil, your math notebook, and there is a worksheet in the learning activities guide that you were given at the beginning of the week. So the first thing I want to talk about is some vocabulary. So there is evaluate, which some of you may recognize. This in general means that you're simplifying an expression to a single numerical value. So in the case of 3 plus 4 times 1/2, we would use our order of operations. So there's parentheses, but it stands for multiplication, so we're going to hold off on that. Exponents, no. Now we have multiplication and division. We have the multiplication. So that's going to be 4 times 1/2 is 2. I'm going to rewrite my expression. 3 plus 2 is 5. So in this case, 5 would be the evaluation of 3 plus 4 times 1/2. But you can also do this with variables. So if you're given an expression, a squared times b, you would want to use whatever you're told a and b are to determine what a squared plus b is. Here's an example of someone doing that. And what they did is they used substitution to evaluate the expression. So substitution is when you replace variables with numerical values. So you plug in the numbers, what I usually say. So if you've ever played basketball, you know that people sub in and out of the game. So what I like to remember is that if we had an x in our expression and we were told that x was equal to 3, then every time we saw an x in something, we would replace it with the 3. We would substitute it. So as you can see in the problem up here, they had a, get that laser pointer back. They said that a was -2. So whatever they had in a, they first put a parenthesis there. Anytime they had a variable, they put a parenthesis. So they had a squared times b. So they put a, but instead of an a, they put parentheses. The squared is a number, not a variable, so we're going to leave the squared. And then b is also a variable, so we're going to put parentheses there. And then they said, okay, every time I see an a, I'm going to put a -2 there. So there's an a here, so there would be an a here, so that's where we're going to put that -2. But this is a b, so we need to figure out what goes in that b spot. If we look up top, it says b is 3. So every time we have a b, we're going to put a 3 there. So that's how they got this right here. And then they finished out that problem. So I'm going to show you an example of how to do this. If we have 12 plus a, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write 12 plus and then parentheses. Because right now, I don't know what a is. I'm going to do the same for all 3 of the problems. So then I have 5 times something and 24 divided by something. Okay, it's going to actually be the same thing for the row below because our equation isn't, or our expression isn't changing. Just our variable value is changing. Wasn't a very good slash. Okay, now what I want to do is I'm going to say, okay, well, a represents 8. So every time I see a, I'm going to put an 8. So I have a, 8, a, 8, a, 8. Now I can evaluate my expression. So I have 12 plus 8, that's 20. That's a terrible color. I'll do a different one. 5 times 8 is 40. And 24 divided by 8 equals 3. Now we need to do the same thing with our a equals 4. So every time I see parentheses, I know the parentheses right now all are a's because we don't have a second variable. So I'm going to write a 4 in each of those spots. And now I can evaluate again. 12 plus 4 is 16. 5 times 4 is 20. And 24 divided by 4 is 6. So I'm able to evaluate all of my expressions because I was told what the variables were. All right, now it's your turn to practice. So go ahead, whenever you're ready, you're going to pause and you're going to want to fill in all of those spots. There's also a little challenge at the end. So rewrite the following expression using substitution. If n equals 3/10, what would 3n plus n divided by 9 divided by n, excuse me, let's say that one more time. 3n plus 9 divided by n. What would that expression look like? You don't actually have to finish evaluating it. Just go ahead and write that expression. All right, I'm going to give you a chance to pause. All right, so let's get out my handy dandy laser pointer. Okay, so when we're looking at 1 minus m, if m equals 1, well, we did that parenthesis again. We substituted the 1 in for all the parentheses. 1 minus 1 is 0. We did that same thing for all of these where we're going to put those parentheses in wherever our variables were. All of our variables were m, so we didn't have to pay too much attention to that this time. So then I substituted that in. 20 times 1 is 20. I substituted that in. 1 divided by 3 is the same as 1/3, so we can just leave it as 1/3. These you did have, because this was a fraction, you did have to remember your tricks for adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing fractions. So in this one, we substituted that second one out. So now we're going to want to do 1 minus 1/4. Well, I did backwards addition because I think that's easier. I said, well, what plus 1/4 equals 1? And that's 3/4, so that's how I got that. For 20 times m, you have m equals 1/4. So it's 20 times 1/4. And remember that multiplication can also mean the word of. So I said, well, what's 1/4 of 20? And 5 is 1/4 of 20. You could have also done the traditional way where you do 20 over 1 times 1 over 4. Multiply the numerators to get 20 times 1 equals 20. The denominators you're going to multiply, which is 4 times 1, which equals 4. And then you would do 20 divided by 4, which is 5. So it's the same answer, just different ways of doing it. And for this last one, we're going to do m divided by 3. So we put that 1/4 in first, and we're dividing by 3. If you remember our keep, change, flip, we're going to keep the first number, and then we're going to multiply, so change that division sign to a multiplication sign, by the reciprocal of the second number. So we're going to flip that number upside down. Because it's 3, that means it's 3 over 1, which is now 1/3. And then 1 times 1 is 1. 4 times 3 is 12. So the answer is going to be 1/12. If you were able to get to this bottom part down here, you should have gotten 3 times 3/10 plus 9 divided by 3/10. Because there are two n's, you have to put that n in twice. So make sure you're putting it in every time you need to. All right, so it's going to be your turn to practice. You can pick either between a Khan Academy practice or the worksheet practice. If you're doing the Khan Academy practice, go ahead and take a picture of the results or summary page at the end to show your proof. Or you can actually show your work that you did in your notebook, maybe to solve these problems. That'd be a great option as well. Remember, for worksheets, you do not have to print them if you don't want to. If you don't print them, you just need to make sure you write down the problems and answers in your notebook so that I can see what you were working on. When you're done, check your work against the answer key. Keep your work somewhere safe. You'll be turning it on Teams Friday. So make sure if you're doing that online practice, it will not save your work if you do not have an account. So you need to make sure you take a picture of it so you're not having to do it twice. Email your teacher if you have any questions. And if you haven't used your full 30 minutes, finish your time on one of your choice math activities, for example, MobyMax. There is a challenge also for this day if you want to try that out. All right, well, thanks. I hope you guys have a great day, and you'll be hearing more from me later. Have a good one.